Welcome all to this course on digital accessibility. This video is week 1, lecture 1, and today we will discuss about introductory topics around accessibility and related background. Just to give you an example, for example, you have to wash utensils, but you have a broken hand with a cast on. Will you be able to access all the tools required? Because the chore generally requires 2 hands. But if you have only one, will you be able to access the necessary tools to complete the chore? Probably not. It might be difficult. So accessibility is not just about the product, it's also about people. Whether or not, in what conditions, in what contexts they are able to complete certain tasks using certain products. The topic of digital accessibility, particularly in today's day and age, has become very important and very relevant because most of the information that we are aware of, that we consume in our daily lives, is becoming available only on digital platforms, right? Be it web pages, internet, social media, through mobile apps, or multiple multimedia forums or platforms or devices. Mobile particularly are a great example of dealing with users with accessibility issues. So I'm sure all of you might be having smartphones. Have you ever tried to check the accessibility settings in your mobile phone? Almost all Android as well as iPhone-based, iOS-based phones have accessibility settings, which can enable closed captioning on your phone, which can enable enlarged text on your phone, which can enable screen reading help on your phone. We will discuss in detail about all of these specific aspects and how, in what manner does these features help persons with special needs. But just for your knowledge, you can just go ahead and check your phone. In many countries, designing for accessibility isn't just a morally correct thing to do. It is also a legal obligation. And it is largely becoming so in our country as well. So recently, in 2016, the Government of India passed an act called the Rights for Persons with Disability Act, which recognizes 21 types of disabilities, which encompasses not just sensory disabilities like blindness or hearing impairment, or commonly known motor disabilities like physical disabilities, impediments, etc., but also encompasses learning disabilities like dyslexia, cognitive disabilities like ADHD, recognizes elderly as a separate kind of user base with special needs. So all of these aspects are there, which because all of these hindrances cause difficulty to certain people to access information in their day-to-day life and poses certain challenges in their day-to-day life in order to complete necessary actions. So you might be thinking that, okay, I want to eat a pizza. I can just go on an application in my phone and order it for myself. Probably it's an easy one-line step for persons who are abled. But for example, I have certain hindrances, but still I want to eat that pizza. How do I get around those? How do I access that? How do I access the application? How do I access the features on my phone? All of those aspects need to be understood by designers who are designing those applications, designers who are designing those interactions on the smartphone, designers who are designing those web pages for wider audiences. More so, such problems become even more enhanced where large-scale public information dissemination is happening. For example, Aadhaar Seva web pages or Passport Seva web pages, where most of the people of the country are going to access the website, and you can have a look at those websites. It's a lot of cognitive load. There are several aspects to the website, long workflows, and many steps to complete one task. So all of those pose certain challenges and hindrances to people who fail to have all the abilities which the user or the designer of the web page thought that the potential user of this web page will have. So this is something what we called an ableist thinking. So ableist thinking is something by which we mean that when we design a product, we assume that our target user group has certain capabilities at all times. So, for example, if if I design a chair, I assume that the person who is you going to use the chair is being able to stand up on their own to get off it, or sit down on their own to sit there if it doesn't have an armrest, and etc. The size of the chair, the size of the person we assume. So all of those things are there. And it is true for all products, not just digital. So that is something which we'll also discuss in detail in upcoming lectures. So in the same light, designing for accessibility takes some forethought. So instead of making a plugin later on that, okay, this part or this feature of the application is now not accessible to a certain set of people, let's add a patch on it, or let's add a feature onto it, or let's add a plugin onto it. If the designers, the engineers have inclusivity and accessibility in their mind, in their design thinking process to begin with, the design decisions themselves are informed accordingly, and they are not in the silo of ableist approach. So this is the same thing which I was talking about earlier, that you can go on your smartphones and probably check the accessibility feature on your smartphone, and maybe explore it. Different types of captioning and etc. might be available, and interact with it. So in terms of digital accessibility, the good news is that there are standards, there are checklists, there are guidelines available for designers and engineers to design for better access. So this course is one such opportunity for you to make yourself aware about those standards, guidelines, processes, and policies around accessibility, to understand them better, and to start to sensitize yourself, to start thinking about them at the beginning of the design process itself, and not as an afterthought. Because if you start thinking about it in the beginning, probably it's easier to implement, because you're still in the ideation phase, you're still in the prototyping phase, you can still tweak the ideas. But once, many a times, particularly in mass manufacturing related products where there are hardware involved, it is very difficult to add add-ons later. It is very difficult to roll back the manufacturing and restart it with a different design. Probably with software products, it is a bit easier, because you might be aware that they keep releasing these updates and patches every now and then. But even for that, there has to be a certain credibility associated with the company. Most of the users are not really happy about a lot of updates every now and then, are we? So it is an important and integral part of our design decision, and it also enables user to acquaint themselves, or a healthy onboarding. So if those accessibility features were not thought of in the beginning, and once they come as a feedback, then you are adding them as a plugin, then probably you are losing losing out on a good chunk of consumer base in the beginning, which you may or may not be able to reach again in the future. So it is important to think about those aspects in the beginning itself. Accessibility is also just a simple function of access. So for example, for a person with visual impairment, may not be able to read text on your website, right? But if you format those text properly, the screen reader there's something called a screen reader which you can install on your phone or on your laptop. On the phone, it is now embedded in the OS itself, so you can just enable it and it will start working. So it is part of the code, for example. So you have to enable screen readers to access the content on the web page. Also, specifically, it becomes a challenge, for example, if there are a lot of images on your website, then alternative text or alt text addition becomes very critical, because images, it is very difficult for people with visual impairment to understand what is there in the image. But the screen reader can read that there is a placeholder where there is an image. But now with up and coming AI technologies and other emerging computer vision models which are supported by AI algorithms, now in the near future, hopefully auto-generated alt text will also become a reality. And it is largely in research, and it's not something very far speculative in the future. Very soon it will be a reality. So, and those aspects also we will talk about in following lectures, in one of the lectures in the course, where we'll discuss emerging technologies and how they are enabling access, particularly with digital interactions. So coming to what really who really thought about access or inclusion to begin with, and how the idea of access or inclusive design was conceived to begin with. So if you look at this image, what do you see? Probably you see a sidewalk with some tactile imprints. Then there is also a slant kind of a way cut in between. So this is something which is called a curb cut. And architect Ronald Mace coined the term universal design, which ideally meant that something which is including all the people and is universally accessible. He is the one who basically conceived the idea of accessibility for all, access for all. Right? And he designed the curb cut in the 1960s. And here's where the idea of a design for a range of diverse users was born. So what do you think? Who are the users for this curb cut? Probably people who are carrying a pram, a stroller, people who are riding a bicycle. Who else? People on wheelchair? Probably yes. There may be more. People with skateboards, people who are walking with white sticks, people who are unable to see, children who may be, for whom it may be difficult, for older people for whom it may be difficult to have a step in the way. So this is something which is called the curb cut effect. So basically we are talking about design that includes more and more people. And this is just a small example of it with one kind of interaction. The interaction here being that you have to cross the sidewalk and move to the zebra crossing. And this is not just an indicator, that, okay, the zebra crossing is here, but also a convenient transition into the zebra crossing. So inclusive design and accessibility is all about embracing diversity. And we're not just saying that accessibility or design for accessibility, we are only talking about people who are disabled. No, we are not saying that. We are saying that all humans embrace technology or interact with technology or different products in many different ways. And the ability may be changing every now and then as well. As we discussed the example of the cast, lady with the cast on one of the hands. There may be other examples. Something which is very commonly you might have heard, I got blinded by the sun. What is the meaning of that? That the sun was so bright that I couldn't see for some time. That means for that duration, you are similar to a person who are blind. Right? So how we as engineers and designers can design technology so that they can enable access to most users at most of the times. So that is why we are saying that, okay, the idea is to embrace diversity. And there may be other different diversity, diverse aspects of humans related to this as well. There may be gender related differences, there may be age related differences, there may be language related barriers. So for example, imagine ordering food if you are in a country where no one speaks your native language or English. No one speaks Hindi, no one speaks English, no one speaks any other Indian language. For example, you are in Japan. People hardly speak English there. How would you order food? Right? So all of those, and similarly vice versa, if somebody comes to India and they have to catch a bus, and how would they access that information? So how we can enable our public information system so that they are accessible to such users as well. So as I said, we are all different kinds of people and different communities, but often products and services are designed as if we are all the same. Particularly, this is happening more and more with globalization. Right? So companies, big MNCs, they make one product and they release it globally. The interactions, etc., are not context dependent. They are just the same across the board. So for example, if people from a culture perceive the color red as the color of stopping or danger or something, and there is a country where people perceive red as a color of positivity, then what color button should be there to depict agree or disagree, for example, in some part of your interaction, or go or no go action in some part of your interaction? What would you allocate? So, but with large number of globalized products, some aspects have also become understandable. So for example, the traffic light is not, the idea of traffic light, red, yellow, green, is not originally kind of born in India, for example, right? But now we associate red with stop because of the traffic light. We associate go with green because of the traffic light. And it is globally the same across most of the countries. So you can take references from that as well, that okay, most people around the world perceive red as stop. So probably it is okay to use that color if I want to depict a no-go action in my interface. But will it work in all sections, with all communities? That is something we need to do some contextual research about. You can also imagine and think about a global product like Google Maps or any other globally used interface. How is it now getting tailored to your city or your country or the context dependent nuances that you as a user would expect. A lot of things were done after feedback. So for example, I don't know, you might be remembering, or most of you might be remembering, when Google Maps lady used to speak in an American accent. So, but this feedback was given to the Google team and Google Maps team, and they catered to it. And they now, so depending on which country you are, where your phone IP is coming from, MAC address and IP, it automatically detects and shares the information in your own country's accent. So now it no longer speaks in, and it also speaks in your vernacular language. So Hindi and other local languages are also available on navigational apps, for example. So this is something which has evolved over time, and all of these aspects also indicate that accessibility and inclusion is the talk of the town. And people are becoming more and more aware that, okay, unless I tailor my interaction, tailor my product to include the needs of specific users, I will not be able to sustain those user bases, right? So all of those aspects are very critical here. So inclusive design, which means that you are including more people, designing for including more people, embraces diversity and maximizes widespread access and usability, thereby ensuring that more people are included. So because humans are so diverse, there may be a variety of limitations as well. So there may be people who are elderly, they may face low vision, low dexterity, lower fine motor skills, lower cognitive skills to some extent as well. There may be children who are accessing your product, who may or may not have learning disabilities like dyslexia or ADHD. There may be people hailing from rural backgrounds or who are not as tech savvy. Then how do you design interfaces to include them? There may be people who are coming from different parts of the world who don't speak the language that your product is using. Then how do you enable the use of your product for them? And then there are, of course, the commonly known aspects of limitations, which are sensory disabilities like hearing or blindness or physical disabilities. So this is a very interesting diagram which I often show to my students in order for them to understand that inclusion is not just about that, okay, I want to do good, or okay, I want to include so and so people, but for the users it's also a sense of pride and equality. It's also a sense of belongingness to the community, right? So how does it say that? So for example, if we look at this image, so there are 3 kinds of users and we give them the same product. Okay, some people are able to access the football match, some are being left behind, they are not able to access. Still, it is inequality because all kinds of people are not able to access, despite the fact that we have given some intervention, right? But it's the same intervention. Here what we have done, according to the specific needs, we have given a different intervention to people who need it more, a different intervention for different kind of need of user, and probably no intervention who don't need it, or assuming that they are able to see the match. So in this case, all 3 are able to see the match, but still it is not equality because they are not feeling included because A person is using a different product, B person is using a different product. And for companies and industry also, it is not economically viable to create separate products for separate kind of user bases. Then what to do? How can we think inclusively? Can we think in a different way to begin with? So here what we are saying, that if we can think in a manner that, okay, we want to include, why to create a boundary in the first place? We can create an accessible boundary, and here no separate product is needed. Only one product is catering to all kinds of users, and they're all able to access the match. They themselves are also feeling included as well as equal. So this is an important aspect of inclusion and accessibility, that it enables equality as well. So another common example of inclusion is the growing emoji library. I think everyone knows about emojis, right? So in 2008, for example, we only had one kind of hand emoji, where the person who was depicted was of white descent, and it was just one emoji. Then later, by 2015, companies started including people of different color, then later people of different gender, and then now we have this wide variety of libraries where all kinds of professions, etc., with genders, as well as hair color, skin color, all of that is available. And then further, it has continued to include inclusive options for people with different physical capabilities, relationships, etc. Right? So like people with bionic arms, wheelchairs, people who are blind. Right? So the point being that the industry, the world is definitely thinking in a more inclusive manner. And if we as future engineers and designers are aware of what is the meaning of accessibility, how we can ensure that our products and our solutions are more accessible, it is definitely going to carve a niche for all of us, and definitely also going to benefit the society in a big way. To summarize this session, we spoke about some introductory topics around accessibility. What is the meaning of access? How we can embrace diversity? What is the meaning of access and diversity, and how they are correlated with each other? And how inclusion also enables equality. That is a very important concept, a driver in this course, in this domain, and I think that is something also that we've discussed today. There are some key references which you can find on your own. You can use these keywords like access for all, the words digital accessibility, of course, inclusive design. There is also a forum called Interaction Design Foundation, which has a lot of information around digital accessibility and accessibility. Then there's also a free toolkit which is available from Microsoft. It's called Accessibility Toolkit Microsoft. There's also this relevant book called Inclusive Design for a Digital World. And this is how the cover looks like. In the next session, we will talk about some definitions. What is the meaning of user experience? What is the meaning of the word accessibility? What is the meaning of the word inclusive design? And other definitions like design thinking and usability. All of these words, what they mean, what are the definitions, and understand the terminology. Thank you for staying with us. Hope to see you again.